Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's live stream. Thanks for joining me for today's talk, although the reason is not necessarily a happy or a positive one. As always, if you are joining me live right now, first of all, I really appreciate that, but let me know if you can see and hear me loud and clear, just to make sure that from a tech perspective, everything is working as it should be. So, what do I want to talk about today? As everybody knows, last week, we saw Russia attacking Ukraine, and therefore I think that has very far-reaching implications, not only political and military strategy-wise. I leave that to the experts, but also economic-wise. And that's what I want to talk about today, meaning I want to talk about the economic effects or the economic impact the whole conflict will have globally from my perspective. And therefore I'm happy that you are joining me today. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the comment section. I hope that then that comment will show up and I will be able to answer the question live during this stream. Sometimes it doesn't work perfectly on every platform, but generally speaking, YouTube is usually the best platform to get the best experience, and I see all the comments and all the chats there. All right, that being said, let me pull up my notes over here. All right. So, war between Ukraine and Russia. I want to talk really briefly, really quick, what happened so far. On February 21st in 2022, that was last week, Monday, at 10:35 in the evening at night, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced that Russia recognizes the independence of two pro-Russian breakaway regions in eastern Ukraine. This leads to a first round of economic sanctions from NATO countries the following day. And then, as we all know, a few days later on Thursday, February 24th, on or about around 3 o'clock Universal Time or 6 in the morning Moscow time, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced in a pre-recorded television broadcast that he had ordered a special military operation in eastern Ukraine. Minutes later, missile strikes occurred at dozens of cities across the country, including Ukraine's capital, Kiev. The Ukrainian Border Service stated shortly thereafter that its border posts with Russia and Belarus were under attack. Ukrainian President Zelensky declared martial law at around the same time. And that's basically everything that I think you can, or everybody that is serious can say with confidence about the ongoing military conflict in the Ukraine. There is something that you might know as fog of war, meaning every information that gets out of a war zone is first and foremost highly questionable and very hard to confirm. And of course, every party involved tries to shape the narrative, the media, the propaganda in a way that benefits them. Therefore, I want to keep it like that. I just want to encourage you to again to kind of do your due diligence with all the information that you get around that conflict and make sure it's verified. So let's get to the topic of this talk. What does that mean for the global economy? Besides the fact, of course, that it is a human tragedy. I want to talk about basically 3 points. I want to talk about first and foremost commodity and energy markets and the effects that we're seeing here. I want to talk about the implications for the supply chain and potentially food prices, and last but not least, what that whole situation means for the financial markets, for the stock markets. You might have heard terms like SWIFT lately, sanctions that the European Union and other countries globally imposed on financial institutions in Russia and so on. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. If you just joined, again, feel free to leave your thoughts, your comments, your questions in the chat, in the comment section. I'm more than happy to answer them during this stream. All right, let's talk about commodity and energy markets. And again, I'm oversimplifying very much here, just for time constraints, to make sure to give you an overview about at least the most important parts of that situation. So when we look at the world's biggest oil producers, then we see that Russia is number 3 behind the US on first place, and then Saudi Arabia over the last decade or so. The US really ramped up their fracking and stuff. That's why we see them at at first place here. But what I want to show you is that Russia is one of the biggest oil producers and also exporters in the world, and in my opinion, that plays not only a role in the conflict itself, but also will have implications for the global economy. Because when we look at how Russia, again, as third world's biggest oil producer, gets a lot of their oil out of the country, and most of that oil is exported to Europe. Then, as we can see on that map, we only have a few pipelines where all that gas and oil is going through, or in that case, the gas pipelines. When we think back a few decades ago, a lot of these countries where these pipelines are going through, in that case, the Ukraine, were part of the Soviet Union. Now they are independent countries, and therefore, Russia has to pay a lot of money in form of fees and gas tolls, or I don't know what the correct term here is, to use these pipelines or to send that gas or that oil through these pipelines through their country. And then you heard about Nord Stream 1 and 2. These are basically a way for Russia to kind of circumvent that and basically go directly through the Baltic Sea, meaning from Russia to Germany through the Baltic Sea, meaning no country between them, meaning Russia in that case makes much more money, higher profit when they sell their commodity, their resources, their gas that way. And of course, Germany announced in at least when we are recording this live stream that the Nord Stream 1 and 2 project is completely cancelled, meaning Germany will no longer buy or receive gas and oil through these pipelines. And then I want to focus your attention, again, we're talking still about oil and gas and implications on oil and gas prices globally, and therefore the global economy, because although I think that's also a kind of wake-up call for a lot of countries to become less dependent on oil, again, the global economy still runs on oil and gas. So what we're seeing here is a map of the Crimea, meaning at the south of the Ukraine, and all these little red and green dots that you can see on the map are basically oil or natural gas fields. And then these different areas are the different areas with the different drilling rights for different countries in that case. Here, another map. Again, I'm not an engineer. I cannot really tell you What that means in detail, you can check the sources by yourself and dive a little deeper into that. But I think what we see very good on this map here is basically, the sea area where Russia had influence and therefore drilling, maybe not rights, but at least the potential to do so, or the power to do so, to kind of use these natural resources. So just in the whole context, I'm not saying that this is the main or at all motivation for Russia or for Putin for doing so. But on the other hand, it also wouldn't be the first time that a nuclear armed permanent member of the UN invades a foreign country because of oil and natural resources. But nonetheless, again, besides the political and military implications that we are seeing here, whenever there's uncertainty in the markets, because of course now there is just less supply of oil and gas, no matter how that conflict plays out, and therefore we see that jump in the oil prices over the last week or so. Again, the whole chart here represents 1 year. Then when we look at it from a 5-year perspective, even then we see that kind of heavy jump. Nonetheless, we see a kind of constant trend upwards. And as you remember, that peak down at the beginning of 2020, that was the time where everywhere in the news was, well, the oil prices are negative. And a lot of interesting trading options were, at least for a very short period of time, possible. And even if we look at the long-term perspective, meaning over the last 30 years or so, we see that in a global context, crude oil price, generally speaking, is almost at an all-time high. Only 2008 was a kind of similar situation where we had very volatile commodity and oil prices in the financial crisis back then. Kind of not so similar situation with natural gas. We also see a kind of constant upwards trend here, but not that big of a jump compared to oil, especially not when we look at it as we see here from a long-term perspective. Maybe we won't see any increasing natural gas prices at all. I doubt that, but maybe we have some lag and some delay till that actually shows effect during the supply chain. Speaking of supply chain, let's talk about how all of that affects the global supply chain, and then potentially food prices and other prices, maybe drives inflation and whatnot. And again, I think the main reason is that the whole world still runs on oil, but it also has some very pragmatic, logistical or geostrategic, reasons. But I found that map, that image very telling, meaning that shows the airspace over and around Ukraine and Belarus and parts of Russia and the Black Sea, and you can see how all the air traffic has to get rerouted around that area. And of course, compared to the sea traffic or merchant shipping, the amounts of goods that is actually transported by plane is quite low. Nonetheless, translate that into other areas, shipping, again, pipelines and whatnot, they are all now at least limited, if not completely cut off from the rest of the world, or interrupting existing supply chains. For example, just a simple reason, if you want to get a certain flight, you might not be able to get it now because the airspace is closed. Then, although of course, the Ukraine is not necessarily one of the biggest global players when it comes to trade. when you look at these numbers, you might get the impression, well, yeah, these are compared to other nations, kind of small numbers in terms of exports and imports with other countries. But and that's the important point I want to stress here, is the amount of corn and wheat and maize and crops and things of that nature that the Ukraine actually exports. Is something that we should think about or consider, because the European Union, I think it's over 50% of their cereals, of their crops, of their corn, and these kind of stuff, sunflower seeds and whatnot, from the Ukraine. And as we can see from this chart, also partially from Russia. Of course, these are countries with very big land areas, where you just can have big agricultural industry, and therefore in a war zone, or when trading isn't possible, that will, at least for the European Union or Europe in general, and therefore as a ripple effect probably also for other parts of the world, definitely have effect on food prices in general, at least over the next weeks, months, and maybe years to come, depending how long this conflict is actually going. Again, what we can see here, Ukraine's top export partners, wheat and maize, the top 10 countries where they export to. Another point that I think plays a role here is fertilizer. Of course, when we talk about agriculture, when we talk about growing stuff, fertilizer is one of the main components here. I think the chemical process of extracting nitrogen out of the air and kind of put it into fertilizer, and therefore being able to grow all that kind of food that we have to then feed all the people that we have on this planet, is one of the biggest inventions in human history, as far as I know. And what I didn't know is that for whatever reason in that process, at least today, of creating that fertilizer, involved is natural gas. And as I said before, natural gas, oil and so on, they always go hand in hand. Therefore, if we not only see a shortage there, we now also see a shortage, and therefore then as a second effect, fertilizer supply, and that might be even have more effect on the situation. Here you can see these kind of big gas tanks. It's kind of hard to find a picture of gas, but you might have seen these. These are basically the big storage facilities to store natural gas. So what I want to tell you is, the question for me is, we have high oil and gas prices on the one hand. Again, oil for basically powering every machine in the world, and gas to also then create fertilizer out of it. Then the whole supply chain was already under pressure because of COVID and whatnot. By the way, nobody's talking about COVID anymore. Isn't it interesting? Yeah. Anyway, so the whole supply chain had already problems, and now again with a lot of trades no longer possible, and with not no-fly zones, but with restricted airspace, with otherwise interruptions in the financial market, which we'll talk about in a second. I think it's just a matter of time till we see rising food prices, and of course I hope that will not end in a kind of humanitarian catastrophe in the Ukraine or other countries around the world because of that. All right, let's talk about financial and stock markets, because you probably heard a lot about the term SWIFT over the last days, and if Russia, or the question if Russia gets excluded out of the SWIFT system, and who does it, who doesn't, and whatnot. So what you might have heard is that the SWIFT is used to send money between banks. That's only half true. So let's talk about that for a second. So SWIFT is just an abbreviation and stands for Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, and is a Belgian cooperative society providing services related to the execution of financial transactions and payments between banks worldwide. And that's the important part now. Its principal function is to serve as the main messaging network through which international payments are initiated, meaning we're talking about cross-border payments here. And to understand that is to understand how banks work, because at the end of the day, when I'm a bank and you're a bank and we do business with each other, basically I have an account, how much money I owe you and vice versa, and you have the same account in your books. And whenever we send money, it's basically just that we update each other's accounts, and the messaging system to tell you, hey, I send your money or update your accounts in that way is SWIFT. It's just quasi-international standard by now for, again, cross-border payments. And of course, if you get kicked out of that system, then all these payments, all these transactions get way more complicated. Of course, there are still other options that you can do. There are always OTC, over-the-counter transactions. You can literally use the phone or write a letter or whatever communication works. But again, of course, that's then not that quality level or doesn't isn't on an international standard level, and just excludes you from doing a lot of business with basically everybody else in the world. All right, but that's the SWIFT system, and we also have to talk about how that then affects the central bank, because that's then basically on a one step higher level. So what we're seeing here is who is actually who holds Russia's central bank reserves, and we see that Russia has kind of big gold reserves, meaning they have a lot of gold stored somewhere for maybe situations like that, to have that as a payment vehicle when everything else fails. Then they have ties with China, France, Japan, Germany, US, other institutions, and so on. And as you know, most of the countries on these lists already excluded already imposed sanctions on Russia, and probably more countries will following. Maybe even more have done so when you are watching the recording of this of this live stream. In the corner right down below, you then can see the different kind of currencies that Russia is actually holding by themselves. So they have euros, they have yuan, I don't know how to pronounce that, and US dollar, and of course, some gold, or around 20%, 25% in gold reserves. So nonetheless, or not nonetheless, I mean, I think we saw sanctions in a severity and intensity that we haven't seen in a long time, if ever, before. And therefore, that's a chart of the US dollar against the Russian ruble over a year. And again, you see, you heard it probably already in the news, the ruble literally collapsed, meaning nobody wants to have ruble, because again, ruble is only useful if you actually can buy stuff in Russia with it, and if you cannot trade with Russia, if you cannot buy anything in Russia, and if you don't want to buy anything in Russia, then again, supply and demand, and then the ruble crashes. When we look at the 5-year window, then that gets kind of is more relative, maybe, because the ruble nonetheless was over the last years always on a way downwards compared to the US dollar, and especially when we look over the last 20 years, then you can't really see that crash in the last week, or the last 1 or 2 weeks. So everything is relative, but nonetheless, I think that shows I think very good how more and more isolated Russia becomes in that situation, which we can also see when we have had a look at the credit ratings. Fitch, Moody, and the other credit rating agency all over the world, basically downgraded Russia's credit worthiness, credit rating to junk. Meaning nobody in the world will lend Russia any money in the future, even if they would have access to the financial markets. Then let's have a look at the effects that it actually had on the financial markets or in the stock markets in that scenario in Europe. In that case, what we see here is the Euro Stoxx 50, meaning the biggest or the 50 biggest companies in Europe. And we see that dip in 2020 when the COVID pandemic hit, good old days. And by now we also see that we have kind of a nosedive over the last week. So we see kind of impact in the European market here. When we look at the US represented by the S&P 500, in that case, it's a little different, not so much impact. Just makes sense. The US doesn't have that much of ties with the Russians or with the Ukraine compared to Europe, of course, where we just geographically much closer, and of course with trade and so on have much closer ties to these countries. All right, that's it so far for my presentation. Let's sum it up, and if you are watching this live right now and have any particular question, thought, comment, feel free to put it in the chat now. Let me just remove this one. All right, so what do I think how this is going to play out? Of course, again, I have no idea from political or military perspective. I just can look what happened in scenarios historically that were at least kind of comparable. And when we look at the last conflicts in not the Ukraine, that are comparable to what we're seeing in the Ukraine, meaning in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and whatnot. These were decades-long conflicts, and therefore, I hope all of that gets resolved as quickly as possible. But maybe I'm doubting it a little bit. Therefore, I think the economic implications are probably very severe, maybe not even so much on the short term, but from a long-term perspective, just because Russia is such a big geopolitical player and therefore affects a lot of economic decisions that are made globally. And if Russia gets more and more isolated internationally, then as a country with a lot of natural resources that a big part of the world still needs, I think a lot of countries will face challenges, especially probably countries in Europe, maybe Germany especially, with now I think 30% or something of the energy of the natural gas would have been come through the pipelines Nord Stream 1 and 2. So just from an engineering perspective, now we have to figure out how to heat the homes and how to get oil and gas otherwise into the country. And then of course on a global scale, when we have the threat of conflict, generally speaking, that is again insecurity, uncertainty in the markets. That is always bad for trade, always bad for the markets. Considering that oil and these resources still running a big part of the global economy, and probably for decades to come till we are actually able to shift some of the energy resources or how we use and produce energy. Till that changes, that will directly or indirectly affect probably everybody on this planet. I only can hope that again it will end as quick as possible. I hope you are prepared in any way possible, whatever that means in your situation, yeah, depending on where you are right now when you are watching this. Yeah, that being said, yeah, I think that's everything that I can say about it from an economic standpoint right now, just because of the fact, yeah, things are changing so quickly right now that they are probably already outdated. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this live, to make sure it's at least a little up to date what we're talking about. All right. Yeah, I'm interested in your thoughts, in your predictions, what you think about the whole situation, where you are from when you're watching this, and of course, what you think, how the long-term implications are of the whole conflict, of the whole situation. All right. That being said, I wish you have, well, I wish you a great rest of the week. Wish you have a great, I hope you have a great day. And I hope to talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye bye.